All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station, PGA edition. My guy Alex Blickle here joining me as always. Going to break down the Arnold Palmer Invitational from his single entry perspective, my MME perspective, looking for leverage and teaching you how to play, not just who to play. Lots of picks and plays shows out there that you can go check out. We'll obviously bring that into it some, but more looking at what the field is doing, how we can leverage that in both single entry MME. It's a bit of an evergreen show off the top, so we always can have sort of the first 15, 20 minutes where we talk about last week, some subjects we can bring across to hopefully help you become a better player. I find that's a little bit better, Alex, as I bring you in, just that, more than a review show of like what won last week. It's kind of better to say like, what did we learn? What can we bring forward? What are some other thoughts that now I heard people say after the event or certain things like that? So how you doing, my friend? What's going on? Another Wednesday morning, back at it again. Week before the Players, the first new, it's a major now. They're saying even Russell Henley says it's a major. What's going on, my friend? How you doing?
Yeah, we've got one more week to win tickets into the Players Championship. We talked a lot about satellites on last week's show. So if anyone wants to hear like a 15, 20-minute breakdown on satellites and how to play them, how we use them, and how we approach them with our own different styles, I think that was a really good conversation. We're going to have some similar stuff today. But right off the bat, I wouldn't say I learned something last week. It was more just a reminder of, even those of us who have played for a long time and are very, very sure and confident about what our best strategy is and how we like to approach DFS lineups. I built a really, really, really bad single entry lineup last week. From the moment the tournament started and I saw my ownerships, I thought, oh God, this is disgusting. I did not do well. And I knew it from the get-go that if I did do well, it was going to be lucky because I just built a really bad lineup. Didn't have enough separators. I was wrong about Tom Kim's ownership. So like the only real separator that I had was actually Keith Mitchell at like 13% up top. And he was great, but I needed to be like exactly right about everything else as a result. And it was just ugly. And I'm very excited to have an approach this week that I know is going to land me on some lower owned guys. And that's going to be my leverage lane. It's going to be a much better week. Hopefully I know it's going to be a better week in terms of I opened the DraftKings app and I'm happy with what I've got, but hopefully the results come along with it.
Yeah, that's actually going to be my topic for today. So last week didn't have any crazy, amazing comments or anything in there that was really super thought-provoking for us. So remember, after this show ends, I know most of you right now are watching it live as we go through it, of course. But if you are watching this on playback or wait till the end after the live ends, you can leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of the show, anything that was thought-provoking, or if you have a question that you think we could bring forward, that would be a good topic for a future show. We always want the first 20 or so minutes to be sort of evergreen so people can go back. Like Alex said, last week was the satellite version. Justin Sullivan's question, though, I'm going to use this to kind of go into my point and what you just said as well. And he says, when speaking about separators and high confidence plays, do you apply those labels to specific plays, or would you consider your roster construction as a separator / high confidence? The answer is, to me at least, is both, because you can have a play that is a separator that we always talk about, and we label those in the stone. You guys have those with your GPP scores over at FTN. You got all different ways that you can find a play itself as a separator, because they're going to be low owned. They're in a range no one's going to. They're squeezed between two really popular players. They could make that work for you in different ways. There's all kinds of ways you can look at it from that perspective. But what Alex just said is hopefully going in, I know going in, I'm going to like what I have on DraftKings, but hopefully it works out. And I want to talk about that. I'm going to use a poker analogy. I had a mentorship call the other day with someone who's a big into poker. And so this came up, and it won't be for everybody, but I think most people know that pocket aces are a pretty good hand in poker. So we could start there, but just noting it, the second part here, the construction, like roster construction, a separator, a high confidence factor of a tournament. Last week we talked about it, and you nailed this part, by the way, Alex. I know you're going to, take yourself down, and you're always one to take an L if you get there on something like your lineup not working out. But just saying it, you did talk about, like, we're not going to leave a bunch of money probably at the top, because we still know Shane Lowry, Nico, Rasmus, Niergaard, they didn't all work out, by the way. Gerard, we just know that they're going to be better when three of the top guys go out and WD before the field starts. But going from a Hoey down to we looked at it yesterday, to Taylor Moore, and I'm being very results oriented on purpose for this. It was like a 9-point projection or something, which in golf on a medium projection, but on like win equity and cut equity and top 10 and all, like it wasn't as much as you would actually think where it's going to destroy you. So if you were leaving money on the table, $700, $800, $900, something like that, that's how you could get away with it, which you nailed that. But I said this to somebody else, and the poker analogy was this. There's a lot of people that recognize bankroll management being important. And so they say, all right, Tambo, I'm going into the season. I know there's about 40 events. I got $4,000 to run this season up, and I'm going to play $100 a week. 40 events, $100 a week. That's who I am. That's my game. But it's a moving target in reality, right? Like when you're looking at it like that, like I think that's the absolute wrong way to be doing it, because the same person I was talking to said, I wasn't really into it last week. I didn't have a good feel for the Cognizant. I didn't get to take in my normal podcast input. And again, to each their own with different content diets, but they said I didn't get to take that in. They said I wasn't really around, up to lock. It started so early this week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being, they didn't feel as good, yet they still jammed the exact same amount of money, played the game. Just it's a FOMO effect. They admitted it. They said that's just the fear. I still wanted to play it. Trying to say is everyone's going to have different weeks where they feel like they have pocket aces. You already said this week you feel better going in, and we're going to get to it. Your leverage lane will be at the end of how you're playing and attacking this week than maybe you did last week. And it's not about last week's result. You could have the same or worse. I don't know if you could have worse if you lost it all. You could lose it all, but you could have the same result. And the point being, everyone has different feels going in. I talked about last week when we have a perfect storm of an event from experience where the chalk goes to die. Doesn't mean it always will, but I like that. Now you've got inflated ownership on top of what it would have been already high ownership at the top because of all the WDs. You've already got people building a ton of condensed lineups with all the chalk. That's a week as an MME player I love. I want to expose as much as possible. And spoiler alert, I got 40% wrong. I lost 40% of my money. I got it wrong. But I can promise you, I felt much better than the guy I was on the call with going in. He felt like he had 7-deuce offsuit, but played it anyway up against people that are playing that think they have pocket aces. It's not about what worked out. It's the example of that combination. It's like I'm playing each week differently. And if he had saved his money, again, it's not about the result, but if he had saved his money knowing it wasn't ready to go that week, back to your point, Justin, here of your separator, your high confidence, all of that, guess how you have $200 or $300 from multiple weeks you took off or didn't play as much to play the weeks where you feel good about it, and you can apply it to that. So I really think there is weeks, there is slates, there is different events, showdown versus classic, whatever, where you think there's going to be a bigger angle of attack and you feel better about it. You feel like you have closer to a pocket aces. Pocket aces get cracked too. Like I said, it doesn't always work out, but just noting that and leaving it there, Alex, I'll kick it back to you on your thoughts. That's how I think about each week. And I think that's how, a lot of people leave potentially a lot of money on the table because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to kind of spin it to, my own personal touch, like I have had a lot of success in round 4 showdown in the last, let's say, year and a half. And I am now at the point where I'm playing as much in round 4 showdown as I am on main slates and as I am on round 2 and 3 combined. And so I'm really leaning into that round 4 edge. And honestly, like there's an argument to be made that I should be playing even more on round 4 than I should be on main slates. But because I think I have I might have 4 top 1% finishes or top 10% finishes already this year in round 4, something like that. So it's been really successful, and I can point to the edge. We've got a really good round 4 simulation. We're doing a good job of knowing how to project a player for round 4 based on his lead-in form and his performance in rounds 1 through 3, specific to each category. So I know that we're doing things over at FTN and in my Discord that a lot of people elsewhere are not doing. So the edge is predictable in round 4. So agree with all that. And to answer the question about separators, I think there are ways to have roster construction as a separator, but it's important to understand when that is. And I think the answer is when you're getting really unique, conditional ownerships. So when you can look at any 3 guys and say, okay, their individual ownerships would suggest that they're all played together at X%, but for this reason and this reason, I think it's going to be like half that or a third of that. And so one NFL example I can give you, I think that it's probably easiest to understand in the NFL, is on the Thanksgiving slate. The Cowboys receivers, if you can remember, some people will remember, others you don't have to actually remember the slate. I just know the math of what I'm talking about. But the Cowboys receivers were both very popular, and Dak Prescott was popular. But CeeDee Lamb was even more popular than Pickens. And specifically, outside of Cowboys stacks, CeeDee Lamb was still like 45% owned, and Pickens was under 10% owned. Within Cowboys stacks, they were both around 60% owned. Yeah. So there was this very clear like conditional ownership of, hey, if you don't have Dak, you're getting Pickens at really low ownership. You're not competing with many Pickens lineups outside of Dak lineups. And so if you get the run out where Dallas doesn't do very well offensively, and specifically like they do a good job against CeeDee Lamb, and consequently Pickens has the big game, and maybe it's 8 receptions for 150 yards but no touchdowns, and the offense doesn't score a bunch of touchdowns, you're getting a fantastic separator, not because he's low owned overall, but because he's low owned in the type of lineup construction that you have. And so when we talk about a lot of the time, like, okay, the field is going to do this. The field is going to have 2 guys over 10K, and we can be different by not using anyone there and going hard on the 9K range and getting 4 guys in the 9K range. What we're saying there is there are going to be so few lineups that have that combination of 9K guys that even though they're all 10 to 15%, that combination is going to be really unique. And so if 2 of those guys or 3 of those guys all do well together, they're becoming separators, even though their individual ownership doesn't really make them so. So I think that's a conversation that we've had a lot, and it's a great question because it allowed us to kind of expand on why that is such an advantage when you get that unique combination.
Yeah, and that's the best way to put it with the math is everything you just said. I would also just say too, sometimes it's a bit of the thought process of how you're playing it. Like, and I can tie it to right now. Somebody just asked, where was it? Phil. Let's say we decide to go 100% Scotty. What would be your next steps in order to make sure you separate yourself? Well, what are others doing? It leaves about 7,100 left. I know a lot of people are going to be playing Ryan Gerard and Nico because they dropped from $10,000 range-ish down to $7,200. So don't play all 3 of those guys together. Could it still work out? Yeah. Can you still get different with those 3 together? Yes. But it's just noting that like that's kind of the angle. What if you went Scotty, multiple 6Ks, and then up higher into the 7K range? Now you're just playing a different roster construction with Scotty. And back to Justin's question off the top, that's a way where you could feel good about a roster construction that's different. And sometimes, by the way, you won't feel good about it. We've talked about it a ton on those weeks where you're skipping the entire 9K range and you're like, but man, there's like 5 guys in the 9K range that everybody loves that I feel like I'm missing out. You are missing out, but you might not be. I mean, what you might be missing out on is the bombs, the chalk bombs, or something that hurt you, and you end up having the winner of the tournament and all the value play options down below that make that play work, a la Scotty the last 2 seasons that we've seen when those wins that he's had. So, that happens sometimes. So just make sure you're looking at something like that. Anything else?
Real quick, that's another thing that we can, I think, use NFL, because it's obviously like so many people who play PGA DFS also play NFL DFS. So there's a concept here that I think is really important. As you just mentioned, like sometimes it doesn't feel good because there are guys in your lineup that you don't have that you think are really good plays. But PGA is different than NFL. When you think of like the best NFL plays that you're afraid that you don't have in your lineup, think like, a really chalky Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown when the Lions are indoors and have a 32-point team total or something like that, right? Their probability of success is very, very high. It's well over 50%. Their probability of smashing and being someone that like you really, really need in your lineup to have a chance for a takedown is probably 25%, 30% minimum, and it might be as high as 50%. But you don't see that in PGA. I'm looking at our top 5 odds from our simulations. And, outside of Scotty, there are 2 guys at 20%. Everyone else is at like 13% to 5%. Even top 10 odds, most guys are between 15 and 25. So when you're really, really scared of fading someone in PGA, you don't have to be. The most likely outcome is that fading them does not hurt you. And it a lot of the time is even more likely to help you than it is to hurt you. Like even someone like Patrick Cantlay, who's near the top in our missed cut odds, 17% to miss the cut, 10% for a top 10, 20% for a top 20. Sorry, I said that wrong. 10% for a top 5, 20% for a top 10. So he's slightly more likely to finish top 10 than he is to miss the cut. And he's one of the better players in the field with one of the higher made cut projections. It's just a very, very different kind of range of outcomes for players in PGA because there are so many guys in each tournament.
Yeah. And the chat's talking a little bit more on these questions. Like Yobi, I mean, we appreciate it. You don't have to throw any money at us. You have questions, you can ask them away, but like you won't hear a ton about this type of stuff. Like, we'll talk about it some, but these are more things you're going to find on picks and plays shows. I know our guy Gannon was out at the course. He looked at JT, looked at Sung Jae, guys that are just coming back and that sort of thing. I think he was higher on JT than he was on my boy Sung Jae. Said Sung Jae still got the wrist strap on. Willie Wilcox, sorry, the caddy there, he had spoke to him and he said, I don't know if he swung on grass for 6 months. So it's like, yeah, he's coming back, but these are, signature events, big boy guaranteed everything. So they're going to try him out. It's, obviously a little bit different than playing DFS or something. He has to actually go out and physically play, but if it doesn't fully work out, there's always outs there, but you never know. We've seen guys say it's their worst week ever and then come out and have a great week. So it's tough to say on that, but I don't think I have too much else to add on any of the other stuff there. Do you have anything else you want to talk about from last week? Anything topical? If not, do you want to just go right into sort of this week with course fit, weather, the event at hand?
There's one thing I think we can kind of expand on last week's satellite conversation and say we're now 1 week away from the players. Are you going to have your typical allotment of satellites, or are you spending a little bit extra since it's the last chance to get a ticket into the players?
I didn't have to spend a lot to get in because I got mine so early. So I'm debating just not doing much crazy. Like I'll play the same for sure, but I didn't even see it's a 44-44. So it's not like the 33-33 where they might put up like a mega or something like that. But I didn't see the 276. I'm just double checking it or anything like that where they were going to have 10 seats or anything along those lines. There is multiple $70 and $37. So yeah, the 37 is about to sell out, so I'm buying that now. But yeah, I'm not doing much different than I usually would. I'll probably play 4 37s, maybe the 70 times 4, right? 2 and 2. And then I think I already got in the $13 as well, max. So yeah, I'll probably have like my normal 18 lineups and move them across all of those. If I find a lineup I really like after this conversation, thinking about my lane and all that sort of stuff, I might move one in on a 70, or like all three of them or something, like get it in that way. But for the most part, probably 15 to 18 shows.
Nice. I will definitely be playing every showdown just to have that extra chance at the $70. But that's the only change I'm going to make. And the main reason for that is for me to spend more to have a better chance. I'd have to go to the $176 qualifier, but that only has 28 people in it. And that's just smaller than what I think is best for my strategy, where I'm going for a top 1% finish. I don't want to play for a top 4% finish. Obviously the lineups would be similar, but I just think it's smarter. It's more disciplined to stick to the contests that I usually do and make sure that I'm playing my own strategy. And obviously, like, it's still unlikely if I play the 176 that I finish first of 28. So it's not like playing that extra $176 makes it significantly more likely for me to actually win a ticket. My lineup is usually either very good or it's not good enough. And playing the 176 instead of the 70 and the 37, so on and so forth, it just doesn't raise my probability of winning one of those tickets high enough where I want to deviate from my typical strategy. Now, what I might do is, let's say that I have a lineup where I love the first 5 guys. I know, hey, these 5 are 100% in my lineup, and I'm just torn on the 6th spot. Maybe what I'll do is I'll spend extra on a second $70 entry, and now I'll have one with this guy in as the last guy and another with the other guy in as the last guy, something like that. So I'm not opposed to that type of thing, but I'm not going to deviate from my typical strategy.
Yeah, we'll talk course and weather for the API here in just 1 second, but I'll tidy up that and we can move on. But just the other thing, somebody asked me this week, and it kind of goes with what you were just talking about also. I'm not attacking the 33-33 right now while I own a 44-44 ticket and it's next week. It's yes, the same lineup could still win those as well, and I could add those into it and et cetera, but I'm moving the money in on what can get me the most upside next week. Obviously, I'd rather have 3 entries than just the 1. So I'm going to be doing the same as you mentioned in Showdown. I'm still going to be chasing to get in there, but mostly on the main slate, it's the same focus just because I don't really need to change anything. Those other weeks that I didn't win tickets, I've had seconds, I've had thirds. I've had the close calls as well, whether it's in main or Showdown along the way since getting that first ticket. But I'm going to try everything I can to get those right now. We'll have a month and tons of different factors and ways to get in for the 33-33 for the Masters. So I'm not as concerned about that right now. People, I mean, it seems maybe common sense or second nature, but it's more also valuable when you already have one, and it gets more valuable the more you add to that one. So for me, that's going to be the focus for this week. All right, let's get to this week. Let's talk about the course. Let's talk about the weather. I know you've got that up there, but first off, do you want to break down? I mean, obviously we know this course quite well, what sort of fits it, but there is some talks, about the rough, even on Tuesday being longer than usual and all these different factors and bombers versus accuracy versus approach versus some of the guys are grinding the thick rough around the greens. What's sort of your thoughts on the course fit, and then take us into the weather?
So I love this golf course, and I think it's one of the most demanding on tour. And it's worth pointing out that a lot of the course fit signal here is based on how firm the greens have played in the last few years, probably the last 5 years or something like that. This has been the course with the most consistently firm, difficult greens on tour. And that's been kind of like its signature. And it's one of the reasons why it has been one of the toughest golf courses on tour. It's especially been one of the toughest golf courses in terms of the frequency of bogeys and doubles made. There are still plenty of birdie opportunities, which I think makes it an even more fun watch, where it's like guys can score, but they're also going to get punished whenever they make real mistakes. So love this golf course. Distance is very predictive here. Accuracy is very predictive here. Iron play is extremely predictive here. And it's worth mentioning what a unique combination that trio is, because what we typically see is if distance is really predictive, that steals from accuracy. If accuracy is really predictive, it steals from distance, and it also steals from approach play. Why? Because if it's really important that you drive the ball well, and you're someone who doesn't drive the ball well, it doesn't matter how good your approach play is. You're not able to take advantage of that skill set because you didn't drive the ball well enough on a course that's demanding that you drive the ball accurately. So that trio, it's a trio that really eats itself most of the time, where you can't see all three spike together, and you do see them spike together here, or at least you see all three of them being very predictive. And so, like I said, that's really unique. It makes it a ball striker's course. It's also a place where you really don't need around the green. And it's not so much that you're not going to have to play well and execute around the green. It's that there's just no real predictability in terms of who's going to do well around the green, because it's a course where it's really hard to manage your misses well. So think of the approach play on 16. I think I used this exact example talking with Pat about it, where there's water short. Think of 8 as well. There's water short. You have a miss that you absolutely cannot make. And so the miss that you have to make is long. But long in both instances is a really tough up and down. So you don't get the opportunity to, approach an approach shot with the mindset of, if I miss, where do I want to miss? And if you're watching, a typical PGA broadcast, and you get those moments where they're doing a really nice job of letting you listen in on the caddy discussion, that's one of the most common things that you're going to hear is, okay, where do I want to miss this if I miss? Oh, this is an easier up and down from the front bunker than the right bunker, or something like that. Or you don't want to miss long, so let's aim, 3 paces short of the pin, make sure that we're not going deep. You can't do that here on most of the holes. So many of these holes, you lose control of where you miss. And so your ability to get up and down is a lot more random than usual. And it's also because the rough is so deep. You lose a lot of the skill signal of how well can you spin the ball, how well can you clip the ball and control your height off of, tight lies. Everyone's just kind of chopping out from this really deep rough. And so all of that combines to say around the green play is not, it's not predictive here. It's really just how well can you drive the ball with both aspects. Long and straight, of course, is always good, but it's especially rewarding here, that combination. And then you also want to be a good iron player.
Yeah. Also, when they're having to fight from around the green, it probably means it's not going very well for them. Like, so when it's so predictive on approach and being able to play out of the fairway and that sort of thing like that, if somebody's having to play out of the green or out of around the green a bunch, that's not going to be well or bode well typically for their overall. And that works in showdown as well. I know when a lot of people are looking at showdown stats, like, yeah, well, that their approach was off. They're around the green. It's like, yeah, but now if they fix that approach tomorrow, you're not going to be worried about needing that around the green. And you're going to need a spike / ceiling type score. So you can kind of erase that and let that slip away in that example. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the other things that I mentioned early on there is that this is a course that although it has really high bogey and double rates, it's also a course that like it doesn't have low birdie rates. And so to your point there, it's like when you're playing well, when your ball striking is on, you're going to hit a fair amount of greens. You're going to have a lot of birdie opportunities. And if you're missing those greens, you're not just missing greens where you're struggling to make par, where the whole field is struggling to make par. You're struggling to make par on holes where some of the field is likely giving themselves birdie opportunities and maybe even scoring on that hole. So that's not true on every hole. 8, 9, like the field's not making birdies there. Number 2, the field's not making birdies there. But there are holes where the field is making birdies, and you need to be at least giving yourself opportunities from time to time on those holes as well.
Yeah. All right. What do you got on the weather? I know we hit it off a little bit off the top, just mentioning it, but what do you want to bring up here with this, just so everybody can go through it?
So at the moment, we're seeing pretty consistent, like Thursday to Friday, where there's not a ton of sustained wind throughout, but gusts kind of do pick up a little bit throughout the day. It seems like there might be a little bit of storm concern, but I don't want to even, try to pretend that I can predict that. The thing I do want to point out is the difference between the sustained winds and the gusts, and how this very much raises the kind of range of outcomes and the uncertainty for what we're actually going to see from the weather. Because when we have something like, this 2-hour window here where the sustained is 7 to 8, gusts are low to mid 20s. What we could see there is the gusts don't really come, and it's calm and it's scoreable. And maybe the afternoon on Thursday really doesn't play much more difficult than the morning. And so we end up with a wave advantage there if the winds do show up in the afternoon on Friday. The other thing we could see here is that it's actually just sustained more towards the gusts, and it plays really difficult on Thursday, and we don't quite get that, level of gusts on Friday. And then there's also this middle where it is just gusty, and you're going to hit some shots where it's not that windy. And then you're going to hit some shots where the gust is up, and when you're hitting the ball that it's tough and you have to play the wind. But there are also going to be shots where you think that you're hitting in a 10-mile-per-hour wind, but up in the air or around the green, it's 20, and it really kills your ball, and you're left, stymied in the fairway, just wondering what the hell just happened. And so it's a really kind of wide range of outcomes. And I actually think the most difficult would be that third option where it's not sustained. You can't just plan for every shot, because if these guys know that there's a 20-mile-per-hour wind, yes, it's still more difficult, but they're really good players and they can adjust for that 20-mile-per-hour wind. If they think they're hitting in 10 and they're actually hitting in 20, they're going to get screwed. The wind's going to kill their shot. They've got no chance in that scenario. So really kind of wide range of outcomes. And what we're going to do over at FTN is we're going to have our tournament simulation kind of account for all the different probabilities and all the different scenarios where sometimes the simulation is going to run where there's a half stroke advantage for Thursday morning. And then there's going to be, a 25% chance that it's running when it's a 1-stroke advantage in the opposite direction. And so you're just making sure we have all our bases covered throughout our sims.
All right. So let's talk about this chalk lineup. We always go through it here, and we're going to talk from a single entry perspective. It's what, your expertise. And I think it's always good for me just kind of chime in, look at it and see what I see. But what are you seeing right now for the chalk build in, say, something like single entry? And are you seeing a one-time version of it? Like it's with Scotty or without, or there's still the classic, there's a Rory version or there's a Scotty version, and then there's this version. What are you seeing this week, just walking into it?
Yeah, it's harder to say this week that it's going to be like Scotty versus no Scotty, because I think it's going to be pretty spread out amongst the top. And so certainly we're going to see way more non-Scotty lineups than Scotty lineups. Right now, we've got them projected at 21% in single entries. But the difference, I think, is, in the last few Scotty instances, when people have gone away from Scotty, it's been, okay, like now we're going 2 of these 3 guys. It's like everyone's starting with 2 of these 3 guys. But we've got Rory, Tommy, Fitz, Morikawa, Siwoo, Hideki getting some. Xander's still going to get some. Henley's still going to get some. So it's more spread out up top where it's harder to really pinpoint exactly what people are going to. I think the part we actually may want to start on for where the chalk is down in this like 6 to low 7K range, where we've got Nikolai Højgaard, potentially the highest owned player. Right now, we do have him projected as the highest owned at 29% in single entry. But then also Gerard, 22%, Keith Mitchell, 17%, Corey Connors, 12%, JJ Spawn even at 12%. I'm finally off of him. So I like the fact that the field might be on him here. But that's a lot of ownership. And remember, we were talking about like that conditional ownership kind of up at the top and ways to separate. Well, the conditional ownership here that's worth thinking about is if Nikolai is 29% overall, he's what, 40%, you think, in Scotty lineup, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, he's in a lot of things, though, because he fits the Rory lineups perfectly. He fits the fits. And I like Andrew's point here. It says Rory and Fitz leaves you 7,100. Just Scotty leaves you. And I know it's like 7,180, like it all rounds, whatever, but feels like a lot would prefer the Rory Fitz way. But to your point of if you just go Scotty, Højgaard, Gerard, Mitchell, which looks like the three most popular down there, a couple of them for very good reason. Højgaard and Gerard, like I said, those prices are just off. And even Mitchell, you can make a case for after last week at 9,300. No matter how you shake that out, there's a ton of different versions that you can get to that kind of make some sense. So I'm not sure where that leaves you, but I definitely agree with them that it does seem like more would end up going that way. And we could see a bit of that shift. We'll see. But I think the thing about the bottom, Højgaard, Gerard, and Mitchell too, but just noting those two at 7,200 and then Fitz up top. It's because Matty fits every lineup. He can start it. He can be the second guy in. He can go with Rory. He can kind of do anything that you want with him. I do think, maybe Minwoo gets a boost, maybe Cootie a little bit. I don't know if you see any others, but those are kind of the ones that stood out. So we can kind of build from there.
Yeah, I think Cootie will be popular. I do think the field's going to be back in on Shane Lowry, by the way, despite his collapse. I think it's weird because, let's say 3-4 years ago, after a collapse like that, Lowry would have been 8%. And he would have been like a sneaky play to go right back to. And now I feel like so much of the field thinks that way, that he's going to be more popular than people expect because people just automatically assume, after a collapse like that, no one's going to play him. Yeah, they are. Number one, because he still projects well. And number two, because enough people are thinking that he's sneaky, that he's actually not that sneaky.
Where do people drop this down then? I'll give you the chalk. And we usually don't do like a full, but at the end of the day, I don't even mind. I'm not playing this lineup. I can tell you that much. So, and I don't think you are either. It is, you can fit this perfectly. It is Fleetwood, Fitz, Minwoo, Cootie, Gerard, Højgaard.
What does that leave?
$0. That's the spend. Get. I just looked at Højgaard and Gerard because I figured they're the most popular. I had Keith Mitchell, but I couldn't find this version. And then I go and look at the other guys that are popping in that mid range. It's Minwoo and Cootie, and so because you already have the two $7,200 guys in there, and then it just becomes Fitzpatrick and Fleetwood. I'm not sure if you can quite get there. I don't think you can bring Minwoo down to Keith Mitchell. That only gives you 11,400. You're a couple $100 off, unless you've got other guys up the middle like Straka or whoever else you think could sort of fit that. But anyway, this will be duped a ton of times this week because it's already a shortened field, and that's kind of the McLovin type lineup in fields of 20 or less to just say, hey, or maybe even 100 or less to say, hey, I'll do this. It's the best on paper. It projects very well. Why don't you go find a lineup that beats me, and I'll let you try and make mistakes. But that's our optimal right now. Kenny already pulled it to see, and I didn't have it up fully, but just pulling it now. I was looking at it quickly.
Oh yeah. This brings a couple things to mind. The first is you mentioned the fact that Nikolai fits any type of build, but by no means am I saying, that he's going to be low owned outside of Scotty lineups. He's just going to be crazy owned within Scotty lineups. He'll still be, minimum of 25% if he's around 30% overall outside of Scotty lineups. So, and this is a really good, example of why that is, because he absolutely fits everything. It's more so that if you have Scotty, there just aren't enough ways to build a lineup like without Nikolai or Gerard that they have to be crazy high owned within Scotty lineups. So that's kind of point number one here. And then point number two is with so many build types kind of fitting these guys, their ownership floor is really low. But also, like, I don't necessarily think that Nikolai especially is a bad play, just because there are there are plenty of guys throughout. Let's say the 8K range. In fact, I think the 8K range is like really, really strong and underowned, where you can build a lineup with, let's say, like 3 or 4 separators and Nikolai, and you're going to be just fine that way.
Yeah, I've got I don't know if maybe Kenny wasn't looking at the latest, but we just updated it. So I got this one. This one's 3 points better. Let me give you a 3v3 on that. It keeps Hogard, Gerard, and Minwoo, but it swaps. Who did I have before? Sorry. So it swaps Fleetwood, Fitz, and Cootie to Rory, Siwoo, and Mitchell. So Mitchell popular at the bottom. Siwoo still getting some love at 92. People can pick their poison. If it's somebody else they like there, whatever. But at least it gets you the Rory version, which again, the main thing holding true, and we're going to talk about leverage and that sort of stuff. The 8K range is just not going to get played very much here. No matter how you shake it out, it's really tricky to get to. So just looking at it from this perspective, you could move Siwoo and Minwoo into 8K guys, but then you're still going to have the very popular Hogard, Gerard, and Mitchell trio, if not 2 of those 3 in a lineup together with a popular guy up top in Rory. So give me any more thoughts on that, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I think this tweak makes a lot of sense, and it's going to be something that a lot of people do, because I think Mitchell's also like a really, really good play. I've got a question for you that I think kind of stems perfectly from this, because as we're seeing, as we build these, like you just said, it's really hard to get to the 8K range. So my question for you is, as we go through the 9K, so Xander, Fitz, Colin, Henley, Hideki, Siwoo, Cam Young, McIntyre, and then we get to the 8s with English, Cantlay, Griffin, Knapp, Hovland, Oberg, Gotterup, Kitayama, Lowry, Burns. Where to you is the biggest tier break where it's like, okay, we clearly are now talking about guys who aren't as good as the guys above them?
That's a good question. That's like, I'm probably still good with, man, I guess for me, it's kind of more spread out. Like I have them in buckets. Like it's almost like, okay, you go down to, I don't know, let's say, Cam Young, Siwoo range, and then maybe I skip to Cantlay or English Cantlay in there. And then I skip down to, the Hovlands, the Kitayamas, the Lowrys, those guys, and then I skip down again to something in the, Cootie and below range. I would say that's kind of how I'm thinking about it right now, but tough to say overall. I would thought you were going to ask me who is the better chalk between Hogard and Gerard if you could only pick one. And it still feels like Nikolai is the better one, if I had to pick.
Yeah, that's also a good question asking. I'm in agreement there. When we get to my leverage lane, I think it'll be even more clear why I like Nikolai there instead of Gerard. But I asked this question to you because I kind of feel similarly as you do, where I would say there's a tier break under 10 where Scotty, Rory, Xander, and Tommy to me seem like the very clear, like, cream of the crop in this event, in this field. And then I don't see that much of a difference below that. Yeah, you've got Fitz and Colin, but I don't see a huge difference between those guys and Cantlay, Knapp. I don't see a huge difference between like the, Siwoo, Cam Young, McIntyre, English, and Kitayama, Lowry, Burns down in the low 8s. So that to me says, okay, that means that the 8K range, underowned or low owned, I should say, is really being overlooked, because there's not that much of a difference between talent and an expectation for those guys in the 9K range. But the 9K range is getting played a lot. The 8K range is not.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear. Like, to me, some of those guys you said there, like Cantlay, Knapp, Kitayama, those guys, I actually like all those guys. So I'll find ways to get there in my lineups, and maybe even in single entry. Again, not my lane specifically, but just noting it. Maybe it could be right. A couple 8K guys could be my lane very, very well at the end of this, because I think at the end of the day, I like that point that you made. Definitely those top 3. I like Xander. Actually, coming into the show, I did say pre-show. I'll spoil it now. Like that was sort of what I was thinking, because I've been playing him already, and I'm going to be playing him in the MME stuff, which we kind of talked about last week, flipping this to have some of that side of it. I just don't know if I'll have to go there for single entry, because there's probably still ways that I can get to one of those top 3. and build down and get a lineup that I really like without committing too much to those, like, we talk about ways to leverage the chalk build. For me, in single entry, you're only playing single entry, but for me, I'm going to be looking at not playing 3 and 4 of those guys down at the bottom,
Yeah, I love Xander this week, and I'm very much entertaining him for single entry. So if you've got conviction there, I definitely think that he should not be this much lower owned than the guys around him, Fitz and Tommy especially. So I like that. And I mean, coming into the week, like, I thought Hovland at $8,500 was going to be one of the more popular plays on the slate, and he's not. So that makes him really intriguing to me. I'm typically anti Oberg, but I think he's a pretty good play this week. And then Goddard has been as good as anybody to start the season, only $8,300, and it doesn't look like he's going to be super chalky. So this whole range to me, just like, it's underowned guy after underowned guy. And there's also, outside of Hovland, there's another commonality between all the guys that I just mentioned. That's a bit of a, if you're really paying attention, you might already know what my leverage lane is going to be.
I have a question too. If you could only pick one, obviously you can do whatever you want, but when you're playing single entry, you kind of got to make some of these choices. We did the game down below with Hogard and Gerard. Let me ask you this though. It's up top. Tommy or Fitz? Both are looking to come in somewhere. Let's see right now, just a quick glance here, somewhere in that 20% range. And again, I just said both of them can work in different ways. I told you like a optimal version where they can actually be played together, but Fitzpatrick or Fleetwood, the F could stand for fraud for at least one of them. Which one are you rolling with here if you got to pick one?
Assuming the $500 isn't super important for me, it's Tommy, because as well as Fitzpatrick has played, I don't think there's a chance that he's one of the 3 best players in the world right now. There is a chance that Tommy is that. Now, our projections are actually lower than I expected on Tommy, and the reason for that is, you look at what he's done so far this year, it's been really, really dependent on around the green play. The ball striking hasn't been outstanding the way it was to finish last season. And then the other aspect of that is last season, when you look at what he was doing when he won the Tour Championship and when he was finishing 3rd and 4th and 2nd leading into that so often, there was a ton of putting driving things. And so do I think that Tommy is now like one of the absolute best putters in the world after that being one of the things that held him back, especially once he got into contention year after year after year? No, I think that's probably going to regress. And that's what our model is saying. Our model just says, you know what, Rory, Xander, and Scotty have made it to the very top in ways that are a little bit more dependable than what it took for Tommy to get there. So our model is actually higher on Xander than Tommy, which is why I like Xander so much. But Tommy is still the one to me where between he and Fitzpatrick, if one of those guys is actually a top 3 player in the world, it's Tommy.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, your boys, JJ Spawn and Connors down below, become separators this week to some of that chalk that's down there. So you could fit them into some of these builds as well. But I'm not sure if you're going back to the well on them, or maybe now you're over the Spawn guy. But Connors, if he gets that approach game going, it's just, can he make a putt? We know how that works out usually, but it's possible.
I'm more interested in Connors, but this is another instance where, like, once we get to my leverage lane, it'll be a little bit clear why I'm not as into Spawn and Connors. Yeah,
and one note on this, Sean Wan. I like that. The Don Juan, we got the Sean Wan 420 smoke one. He says with Gerard 22%, why not play Nico Hogard at the same price? It's because Nico is probably actually going to be higher owned than Gerard. So you're not really getting any type of separator there, but just noting that. And we can, don't have to name them, but we talk about it. That's one of the things that's nice, for Alex and I doing our own thing and even being parts of different companies and that sort of thing. If you're not keeping your finger on the pulse around the industry to know what's going on, you're definitely behind. That's part of what our stuff is able to do and think about and leverage and get after that. So I think from that perspective, there is certain sites out there that are liking certain projecting players better, which is leading to more projected ownership, which is what more people are following. And that's one of the benefits of just getting a little bit different and joining a community like one of ours, or both, because you can play them both. You can put them both together. Like we always say, you can play them both. You can join Alex's Discord. You can join FTN. You can join Ship It Nation. All the options are out there to put those things together and mix and match. But everyone has different budgets. I get it, but just noting that's kind of the
I
benefit.
was going to say you put all those together and it might not be as expensive as the one that's putting Spawn at 20%, but we've got Spawn at 12%, and he is one that I'm monitoring. But I don't want to spoil the leverage lane, but one thing I will say ahead of time, which it's going to be another hint, but I won't give it away, is the field is definitely kind of in on this idea that Bay Hill has become a course where accuracy might matter even more than distance. And that to me is, I think, why Spawn is projecting to be somewhat chalky, because he's one of the more accurate guys off the tee. And particularly, he's one of the more accurate guys in terms of how many fairways he hits, because he's also short off the tee. And so the reason for this is because obviously the rough is played very difficult here and the greens are incredibly firm. So even when you have a good enough lie to actually advance the ball to the green, you have no chance of holding the greens here. So there is a premium on hitting fairways. And that I think is really driving a lot of ownership this week. And it's partially why, you get Tommy at 20%, Fitz at 22%, Xander at 12%. What's the biggest difference between those guys? Xander's long. They hit more fairways than he does. That doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't make them more accurate off the tee than Xander is. Xander's actually been driving the ball very accurately this year, but that's a conversation for 15 minutes from now.
Yeah, and nobody's playing decky. I mean, somebody is, but you get what I mean. Like you're going to be fine, but that's pretty much how that always goes. Kenny brought it up again, especially in like the higher stakes single entry stuff. You're going to see those guys be very popular. You can get different above them. Like if you have a Xander, Decky, whatever Fitz lineup, like sure, you can play them in a different way. It's just, you're playing into guys that just, big time ownership already. And then you're jumping on top of that as well.
That's a good question as well. If you don't want to play those guys, if you don't want to play Nikolai, Gerard, Mitchell, throw Spawn and Connors in there as well, are you more likely to pivot to guys like in their price range, Harry Hall, Nico Echeverria, Sam Stevens, Nick Taylor, Sepp Straka, Ryan Fox, Daniel Berger? Or are you trying to build a lineup that just avoids the, like, let's say 67 to 75 range, and maybe you bottom out at someone like a Jason Day or Adam Scott in a super balanced lineup, or maybe you even take a chance on, someone way down the board like a Putnam or Novak or something like that, and just totally avoid that range?
I'm not going to avoid them. I'm just going to be very, I said this it was last week's joke. I'm going to be very cognizant of how I use them. And so for me, it's going to come up in my lane because already I'm there now. So I'm definitely going to be using those guys still. It's just going to be using them carefully. The main reason is I get like anything can happen, but I'm not as in love with like going, again, it has nothing to do with him winning last week and the ceiling spike and all that. Like I'm not as in love with like a Nico, Harry Hall, a Daniel Berger, Taylor Pendrith. These guys all could pop at any time in an MME set. Yes. But when we're, sticking to single entry for 2 seconds here, I think for me, that's going to be something where I'm going to just be willing to play, one or a couple. And if I'm getting enough different in my lineup or up top, almost back to Justin's question off the very top, if I'm looking at, I'd be looking at the latter part, the second part of this, where it's like a separator or high confidence roster construction decision more than just moving off and looking for a separator off of a certain play, to answer your question.
I may have asked it poorly, but I'm in agreement with you that I'm more likely to just, play my favorites of these guys and then get different around them. But my question is, if you're already set on not using these guys, would you prefer to pivot right off of them, or just avoid the price range as a whole so that you're not playing someone directly in competition with them?
I would prefer to just move off of them because 2 reasons. One, I don't like the guys around them as much. And that's not the only reason, because that's all back to picks and stuff, but also because those different builds are going to be how you're leveraging. Like if they're not coming through and the guys around them aren't coming through, again, they can very well. It's a small field, but that really hurts the Rory, the Scotty, all those types of lineups where my Xander Cantlay lineups, let's just use the Cali connection as an example. Well, now they could be in really good shape because not only could they be in the mix, but I don't require those guys that are getting hurt down low. This is what we focus on the majority of, and so many people mention it or say it or whatever, but we're so fully focused on that. We all have the same pieces, like a chessboard. We all get the same pieces. A chess master has more in the tank up top to say, okay, I'm going to be thinking about what if. And to my guy Title's point, he always says, not how often you're right, it's how much you win when you are right. There's a way that you can be a couple moves ahead there. It doesn't mean it'll work, but you should feel good about being a couple, 2 to 3 moves ahead by what if this, then that ends up working in your favor. And not many people are thinking about that. They're just thinking about to Nico or not to Nico. Is Gerard going to be good at 20% or not? It's like there's more to the thought than that. So I think that's a good call out.
Awesome. Anything else we need to touch on?
I don't think I got nothing else there for leveraging the build. And, people, we've talked about flipping the build, moving around, all that, some of that's going to come up in our lane. Do you have anything this week? I know we've talked about it, last week going through it, that this show wouldn't have as much on the betting and all that type of stuff. But is there anything that stood out to you this week from the betting breakdown perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to take this in a bit of a different direction. I like some of the underdog birdie props.
Okay.
And I also think it's worth mentioning, like last week, we found a really big edge on Saturday in the strokes on holes 16 through 18. And they're way more likely now that NFL is over, now that this is a signature event, to have that sort of thing. So I think the underdog product for PGA is like, this is the time to play it. Whereas in the first couple months, it was really weak, but I like the over on 3.5 birdies for a lot of the better players in this field. And the other thing I'll say about that is we do have to be careful about how we play these, because like, let's say you threw in 3 guys, okay, over 3.5. Instead of getting the 6.5x payout that you usually get for 3-pick plays, there's a correlation penalty that takes you all the way down to 5.06x. If you throw in a 4th, instead of getting 10x, now you're getting 6.06x. So the more guys you throw in, the higher the correlation penalty. The strategy that I like this week is find all the guys that you like for over 3.5, and then just take 2 at a time. Because if you're only using 2, it takes you from 3.5 down to 3.22. That's much, much, much easier to digest than like 10 to 6. So I really like those this week. I think 3.5 is just too low for the better players who make a lot of birdies in this field, and hopefully that lasts throughout the whole week. And the other thing I'll say there is, if you can, it's probably better to take guys early on who are less likely to deal with the really big wins that are potentially coming late in the round. And
these are overs, right? 3.5
overs, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up the penalty math. I think that's something certainly important. I do got to stick to my roots here. Kenny said earlier, Tambo wants to expose as much as possible. Here come the restraining orders. When you first said underdog birdie props, I heard underdog 130 drops with all the layoffs that there have been out there. But we know, they're not as focused. So like you said, you got to get these in now while you can. Their market is moving to the prediction side of things. So we'll see how that shakes out. But unfortunate for those out there that, got let go. Some really good people. I saw some friends around the industry, try and do as much as we can to help out over at the ship it side. But, if anybody's looking for anything or has ideas, always open. You can hit me up on X at ToeTagginTambo. So I got to make that, a correlation or assumption. But take us into the one and done. Then, you went into that. We've been playing it each week here. What are some thoughts on this one? We'll just do it from the general, overview, because I know some people are really looking at segments and stuff like that right now. And obviously those have different structures to them, where like if you haven't used, if you're already dead and you haven't used Scotty or Rory, are they great here? Absolutely they are. They'd be great options, but you might want to hang on to them because guess what? They're pretty good at golf and they could be great at a lot of different courses throughout the season. So you might want to save them to help boost a different segment. But let's talk just straight across the board this week, all things considered. What are some of your one and done thoughts?
As we go further and further into the season, it becomes harder and harder to talk about one and done in a useful way for most people, because number one, like our teams are going to be in drastically different positions. If you're near the leaderboard and you might win a segment, you should be playing this differently than somebody who's way down the board, has no chance of winning the segment, and needs to get something going. And similarly, we also don't have the same people available as other people. Some have already used Scotty and Rory, or Rory and Tommy and Xander, things like that. And some of us have everyone available at the top. And so we're starting to get to the point of the season where it's just really hard to talk about this in a really helpful, impactful way. But what I would say is this is another signature event, obviously. So there's if this is the kind of event that we save players for. Use your favorite guy. What I will say is I do think ownership is going to reflect what I already talked about, which is I think the field really wants guys who are hitting a lot of fairways. So we'll see plenty of Scotty here. We'll see plenty of Tommy and Fitz and Colin, and maybe we won't see quite as much Rory or quite as much, like Cam Young, Goddard, Knapp, some of these longer hitters. And so I will probably be picking from some of the longer guys and trying to get a lower ownership that way.
Well, one I was going to ask you about, actually, if you just brought that up, is because we've used this all season. I think he could definitely fit the mold here. Is this a spot to go Goddard up? Like, there's nothing that he's really done poorly to disrupt anything that he's done already amazing this season with the wins, but I don't think anyone is really on him this week with all the other big names. And we've talked about it. There is multiple people already out there that have 1.6 or 1.7 or whatever it is, and 1.6 and change that they got from him for the win. There's an opportunity here where we can surpass that and beat their Goddard up lineups and make up for the rest of the season. So I do think he's at least somewhat interesting from that perspective. He kind of fits the mold on your bomber narrative a little bit, which you've kind of talked in the past a little bit about one and done ownership and that sort of thing. So do you think he could be a guy that we could use here and try and get that leg up with him?
I definitely think we could use him this week. The one thing that's holding me back a little bit is that his long iron play is not very good. And this is a course where you're going to have to hit some long irons. Now, he will have to hit fewer long irons than many others because he's so long off the tee. So that helps him a little bit. He's also good out of the rough, so that helps him a little bit. And yeah, I think the best argument for it, as you said, is a lot of the teams that we are already behind are guys who had Goddard up for the win. So if you can get Goddard up in a win where he's getting a lot more, now not only did we just match the guys who already have him and were way ahead of us because of that, but we're way clear of those guys. And so I really like the strategy of, being very, very purposeful about when we use the players who already won and are already part of the reason why we are behind. And so you can, apply the same logic to basically everyone who has won this year. You can apply it to Rose. You can apply it to the guys who just won, and especially guys who already won a signature event. So very much agree with that thought. And I think Goddard is one of the strongest one and done options because of it.
One last one for me. What about Nikolai? So if he's going to be super chalk in DFS, I will say this. I don't think he's going to be super chalk in one and done. I mean, the field's just too strong overall. He did turn it on Sunday. I know you can just sort of fire away, but if you like him this week, that would be a way to play him if you're not using him in DFS, or even if you're using him in both. I mean, if he's getting there like he did last week, that it could be valuable. I don't know, but it's just an interesting thought I had, because I don't think many will go to him this week after this week based on the field strength and everything that we have at hand here. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, very much agree with that. And I would also say if you're going to consider him for one and done, you should probably be betting his outright, because if you like his chances to win this tournament up against the best players in the world, then you should like the number that you're able to get for him.
Yeah, definitely don't hate that either when you talk about from the betting breakdown perspective. That's a funny one too. It's like the opposite of the Nico stuff or the Lowry stuff. It's like the collapses and the wins and how people react to them. It's like someone that they really loved last week didn't come through fully, but when you saw him on Sunday morning before the Lowry collapse even starts, by the way, people are going nuts about Nico again. And then it just turns off, because as soon as it's like, well, a different Nico, by the way, is making his way up the board and about to win the tournament. Lowry's collapsing. It's all this big thing. And now it's like, we know Nico is getting played this week at 7,200, but how many people are betting him outright? How many people are playing him in one and done stuff that you can still use in one and done being peer-to-peer? You can still use that to your advantage because the field's just so strong. And I just don't think people would end up there. Again, depends on the type of tournament that you're in. How far back are you? If you want to take a shot that way. Also the fact of, if you have segments, maybe you don't want to burn up a Scotty, Rory, or some of those guys. You say, I'll go back further in the pack, and you could use guys we talked about. Somebody else talked about Morikawa. Morikawa is obviously hot right now, second place here last year. If you want to use them, it's fine. But yeah, it all depends on what as the longer the one and done season goes on, it becomes almost like NFL Survivor, which is what it's sort of made after, I guess. It's like the idea of, it matters more what's gone on already for you than it does about somebody being able to tell you the answer sheet. And not that saying that that's what everybody's looking for, but just noting it. It usually is, but it's not existing the same way in this. But yeah. All right. Ready for your lane? You said you kind of hinted at it earlier anyway, so I'll let you go ahead and then we'll roll from there.
Yeah, my leverage lane is to take advantage of this kind of growing narrative around the industry that accuracy is really what dominates here. And specifically, like we have strokes gained driving accuracy at FTN, which I think does a much better job of measuring accuracy than percentage of fairways hit. And just like a really easy example, anyone who's watched golf, anyone who has watched these two players play this year would overwhelmingly say that Jake Knapp has driven the ball better than Victor Hovland and more accurately than Victor Hovland this year. And one of the ways we know that is Victor Hovland is not even gaining strokes off the tee. He's averaged negative in the last 4. He's lost in 2 of the last 3. He's using pool floaties on the range because he can't figure out what he's doing with his driver. And Knapp is driving the ball extremely well. And yet Hovland is 17th in fairways hit this year. Knapp is 76th. Why? Because percentage of fairways hit, fairways gained has a massively inverse relationship between distance and how many fairways you can hit. But that's not what accuracy is. Accuracy is how often can you hit your line? Where are you missing? When you're missing, are you in control of that? It's not just how many fairways are you hitting, because the longer hitters have a more narrow margin of error to still hit fairways. So you can apply that to a lot of players this week. And you see, like, when you're looking at the GPP scores over at FTN, player after player with a great GPP score is someone who's very long off the tee, good iron player, accurate off the tee, but they're not going to project well in any type of model that has fairways gained or percentage of fairways hit as one of the leading predictors. And so Knapp, Oberg, Kitayama, Sam Burns, Adam Scott, like all of these guys are underowned for the exact same reason. And that really intrigues me. And so I'm going to be in on a lot of those players. Xander's in there as well. Cam Young is in there as well. Cantley's even in there a little bit. Thor Bjornsson, Keith Mitchell, lots of these guys kind of all fit the same bill. And that's going to be my leverage lane, just taking advantage of this, like, one misstep that I think that the field is taking this week.
Is Thor the same price as Mitchell?
Yes.
I think he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting as well. Just, I feel like really similar game types, but what happened last week, of course, we know. So that's what people will typically go off of. But also people liked Thor last week. Like they were in on him and it just didn't work out. Obviously missed the cut, but
they are basically the same golfer. Like their mentalities are similar. Their skill profiles are remarkably similar. They make a ton of birdies, but also make mistakes. They are remarkably similar golfers. And yeah, anytime that they have a clear ownership difference, then I'm going to be on the lower owned guy.
And so interesting is just looking at like early, again, you got projections there. We've got them here, everything like that. But if you look at it, more people are going to Connors and Mitchell than Thor. And in your prime example there of like Thor versus Mitchell, Mitchell's fine off the tee, but obviously and great on approach, but Connors, but Thor can still do that. And Thor's can be really long off the tee. And that could be helpful here. So if you're going more bombers in that perspective too, that could fit also. So I think that's where like some of the stuff I'm fine with, like when you talked about earlier, it's more, if it was like Mitchell to Thor, I'm fine with that. If it's like, the Nico range, I might just still play Nico and figure it out elsewhere, but I'll be different in enough spots beyond that. And then the other thing too, just, now coming full circle, outside of like Fitz, maybe some Decky and probably some Kawa, even the 9K range doesn't look like it's going to be that heavily owned. Like what are you seeing? Fitz, Kawa, and then some Siwoo?
Yeah, and Hideki at like 13, but otherwise, yeah. One other thing I'll say about distance too is think about why people are gravitating towards guys who hit a lot of fairways this week. It's because the rough is really difficult and the greens are so firm. You know who benefits from their ability to hit out of rough when they're in the rough and the ability to hold greens either from the fairway or the rough? Guys who hit the ball hard and can create spin and can create elevation. So the distance helps more so than just off the tee. It's also about who they are when they then get to their approach shot. So I think this is one of those weeks where there's actually like a pretty big inefficiency that the industry is undergoing, and we can take full advantage of it.
I like that. Yeah, my lane's gonna be quite simple. Coming around on the show, it'll be 2 or 3 8K guys up the middle. And the main reason is I don't see anybody getting over 15. You could see, one hit that range or something like that, but I just think it's going to be so much better. And you can still get guys up top with that. So like if you go higher and then skip the 9s altogether, if you started a 10 or 10-3 or somewhere in that range, you'd be able to drop down. But I think 2 8K guys for sure. I think it's loaded and people are going to talk about it. So it's going to be a prime example. We always talk about where those guys are going to get to 8 to 12, meaning everybody knew they were good and like they fit in here and they make sense for this and all of that, but they didn't fully commit to them. So yeah, two plus 8K guys in my main $200 single entry this week. That's going to be my lane. I've already got a couple different variations that I like of it. And I'll answer this one for the people because everyone knows about my interventions. I've skipped all sessions. I've never actually been to an intervention. I just talked about them. I didn't actually go, but I don't know if I can get to my guy here this week. And if he burns me, he burns me. It's his first week back. Like I said, just hearing Gannon being on site and talking to Wilcox and mentioning that stuff and still wearing the wrist strap, all that. I mean, I'm not fully one to play into that, Alex, but from golfing yourself, those typically aren't good signs when they're out there. You might get a spike round or two or something, but will it be something that actually results in a solid result that you need this week for something versus the other opportunities and options around it and so many unique plays that you could go to make your lineup work? I don't know if I'll need that this week.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in on Sungjae.
Are you ever, though? Are you usually? Could you be? Could I sell you on him at some point?
Yeah, when I'm in on him is when approach signal is lower than usual and around the green and putting have a lot of signal because that's what he does. Like every single event, he loses a ton of strokes with his irons and gains on and around the greens and is fine because of it. But the problem isn't that he can't play well when he's not gaining with his irons. It's that he can't spike and actually contend that way. He can only save himself and still make the cut and finish at best like 20th or something like that. So there's just no ceiling until he improves the irons. And maybe now that he's healthier, he can get the iron play back in order. Cause it's not like that was always who he was, right? He was actually a very good iron player when he first got on tour. He just really, really lost it over the last 2 years.
Oh, this is disgusting. You're correct fully. And that's what I take flack for all the time because it's like, oh, Sungjae's, a luck box. Look at all these around the green chip-ins. Like, no, it's just what he's actually good at now. And usually he doesn't do much more, but I will say disgusting odds. I just looked at my book for the Masters, which is even when Sungjae was in his downturn, it's like, guess where you can really, ask Patrick Reed and Jordan Spieth and those types of guys, how things can work at the Masters that year, even that Sungjae was, having a bad year, but still showed up for a 5th at the Masters. A lot of around the green play. Again, he's like 70-1 to win the Masters. He should be 170-1.
To your point, he's 175-1 to win the API and 80-1 is the best available for the Masters. So yeah, it's all right.
Maybe I just got to bet him at API then. Maybe just talk me into it. No, it won't fit anything that we need there, but just funny.
I definitely won't be betting Sungjae at the API and don't recommend anyone does so.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff, what you got going on for the week, and then we'll get out of here.
At Alex Blickle 1 on Twitter, you can find all of the FTN data through there, and you can also find my Discord through there. And yeah, it's been especially fun on the picks and prop side, pick 'em and prop side lately. So if that's part of your game, I always say like I use pick 'em and props as kind of my cash games since I haven't played cash in DFS in years and years and years. So if that sort of thing interests you, then check out my Discord.
I think I just lost this, but yeah, definitely in there. I'm in the Discord as well. Talking it up with the boys. Stump, Brendan Todd, his boy. We've talked about that a few times and some others in there that are in both Discord, Ship It and that one. So shout out to you for everything you're doing over there. If you guys want to check us out at Ship It Nation, you can try us just for 5 days. If you want to get this event and some of the other sports that are ongoing right now, of course, you can just get the 5 days for $19. As you see at the top, that includes Discord and SaberSim. But if you want to get in on the early bird special leading up to the Masters, you're going to be able to get everything we offer for the entire season, including SaberSim for the whole year. And then lastly, just for our OG members, so people know, just reminding you, because we've said this a million times, but want to make sure it's clear, the starter plan where you literally pay almost $100 just for SaberSim on their site is going up and won't always be available at $97 for your first month and then $129 locked in. This $139 will go to $149. So if you have questions, if it's confusing, hit me up, tag me in the Discord, whatever you want, just to get the best possible price and lock it in long-term to keep it grandfathered. You would want to get in before the end of March. So hit me up at ToeTagginTambo. If you're already a member at Ship It Nation, you can tag me in the Discord. Alex, appreciate you as always, my man. Maybe see you next week a couple times. We'll see about that, but exciting stuff with the players just around the corner. Thank you guys for watching. For Alex and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.